We're afraid of what people will think, or we're afraid we're not good enough, or we're afraid we're too much. And so we hold ourselves back. And when we do that, we're muting ourselves. And there are too many people that are muting themselves in the world. And I, for so many years, was one of them. I've discovered the power of unmuting myself, of showing up in the world in a way that is joyfully expressed and boldly alive. That's something that has been so important to me as I've discovered how freeing it is to be unmuted, to unmute our body and to unmute our ideas and to unmute our desires, to unmute ourselves in relationships and at work, and to be our own advocates and to ask for what we want and need. The unmuted life is a life that is fully alive and fully expressed and confident and clear. And to me, it's the only way that I know how to live now. I know what it's like to feel confined and stuck and small and silenced. And I also know what it feels like to be expressed and alive and joyful and present and seen. And it's so much better of a life to be unmuted. And that is what I want to bring you into. Are you ready to unmute yourself? Let's make it happen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. I'm Rachel Druckenmiller, the host of Unmute Yourself, and I'm so excited to see all this activity in the chat already. Kofi, welcome. So glad that you're here. I know you're somebody who always is a bright light in the places where you show up, and I know about you because of Scott MacGregor, who is also the reason I know about our guest today. So exciting kind of connection there. Maria Rouse, good morning. So glad that you are with us. Daniel Hall, shout out to Daniel Hall. Something I want to mention is that this show is powered by his company, the analytics from the show, Peekaboo, power the analytics behind the show. So if you get invited to these episodes, if you get notifications about things that I'm doing, it's probably because I've gotten information that tells me that you want to learn more and you want to hear more and you want to know about what's going on in the unmuted world. And so shout out to Daniel Hall for that. Tom is here. Yay. Another member of the Outlier Project community. Tom, so good to have you. Tom recently passed a certification to become a docent at the zoo near where he is. So he is like animal lover, animal knowledge extraordinaire. So if you're ever in Northern California, Tom, drop in the chat where the zoo is. Let us know. We can come visit you there and learn all about all of the creatures. Maureen, good to have you here from just outside Chicago. We've got Nita. Hi, Nita from Atlanta. Good to have you this morning. Rich joining us from Wisconsin. Carla from Iowa. Kamau, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad to have so many of you here today. And Toby, I'm not sure if I said hi to you, Toby. And Veda, oh my gosh, the Oakland Zoo. Thanks, Tom. Thanks so much. I couldn't remember the name of it. So awesome. Kobe, Tom is my twin brother, in case you didn't know. Welcome. Well, that's so good to hear. So keep them dropping in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from. And what I would love to do is we started the last show with this, and I think it's a really helpful thing for us to do to help ourselves focus on taking in the good. I know, as I've shared in recent episodes and in some recent LinkedIn posts, I've been dealing with some different challenges that are either health related or business related or interpersonal related. And I've been feeling a bit heavy. And so one of the things that's been helpful to me is at the end of each day to make a list in my journal and write down what were 10 good things that happened. Oh, thank you, Veda. What were 10 good things that happened that day? 10 bright spots, I like to call them. So bright spots. So why don't I invite you to drop in what has been a bright spot from the past week for you? So something that has been a source of joy, something that you're grateful for, something that made you feel alive. You could drop in the chat. I'll share something that was was a bright spot for me. I'm not sure if I've shared this with all of you. Well, a major bright spot, worked on song number 3, started working on song number 3 with my producer, Leroy, who all of you met last week. And we've got 80% of song number 3 kind of together. And it's amazing how that can happen in 2 hours. And if you want, I can play a little itty bitty snippet. You want to hear a little itty bitty snippet as we get started here? You can drop in this chat and say you do. I'll just play a little part of it for you. Here we go. Let me see if I can get it. All right. And it's going to be a little garbled, but oh, yay, John. Our call was a highlight. I'm with you. Yeah. Drop in the chat. What was a bright spot for you from the past week? Let us know. A bright spot, a moment of joy. Bought myself a Disney cup and I'm over 40. Woot woot. Okay. Snippet. Let me see if I can find a part. Hold on. Okay. Here we go. All right, here we go. Ready? This is a snippet of song number 3. Y'all get special privileges for coming to the live show. Okay, here's the part of it for you. Here we go. Hold on. One second. Here it goes. I don't know how well you can hear that. Enough, Tim? So this is going to be a song inspired by my car accident that happened 3 years ago when I was hit by a pickup truck and fractured my back. And it's my redemption song to say that, you know, we don't see things coming. We get knocked down and we can still choose to rise in the midst of that. So that's what that song is going to be about. Y'all get a little sneak peek here. Oh, thanks. More to come on that. Excellent. There we go. Yeah. So that's a snippet of song number 3. Working on song number 2 and 3 at the same time. Goal is to have a 6-song EP by the end of the year. So very excited about that. Thank you all for your continued support of my music. I really appreciate it. Let's see. Any other thoughts? Did I share? I'm not sure if I, Daniel, thank you. Before I introduce our guest, I have one last thing. I'm not sure if I mentioned this to all of you or not on the last show. Tim, you can give me a thumbs up if I did or didn't. Did I tell you all that I got selected to do a TEDx talk on my birthday? I don't think I told you all this on the show. I posted it once on LinkedIn. I was like, I don't think I told everybody on the show, but I will be giving a TEDx talk in Rockville, Maryland on my birthday, which is on July 8th. It just coincidentally, the TEDx event happens to be on July 8th. And I'm going to be starting to prepare for that. Yeah, best birthday gift ever, for real. It really is. Veda, I know. So excited. Finally, right? Yeah, so doing a TEDx talk has been a dream of mine for a long time and really excited about it. So I've got 3 months to get my act together and prepare for that thing. Jen, welcome. Beth, good to have you here. Yeah, just very excited, you know. What's it about? I'll share more on that as it gets closer. I'll keep some secrets, but I'm very excited about it. I am a Cancer. That is true. And Daniel, yeah, not too far from you. So wonderful. All right. Well, those are some updates I wanted to share with all of you. Music, TEDx, other fun things. Thanks for dropping the bright spots in the chat. Something that you can keep in mind to do for yourself anyway on a daily basis of asking yourself, like, what was something good that happened today that I can take in and absorb and sit with? Because it can really help, I find, buoy us and sustain us when we're going through things that are really hard. So without further ado, I want to introduce our guest. We first connected, I want to say 2 years ago on LinkedIn as a result of a really cool guy named Scott MacGregor, who I found out about from my friend Eric Silverman. So connection. Part of our show today is talking about community and the importance of it. So it's not lost on me that how this guest is even here is the results of community and the results of connection. So I found out about Maayan through that group of people. And then we connected. We have a shared interest and passion and well-being and mental health and optimizing ourselves and our work and other people. And so it sort of made sense that we would have a conversation. She's also someone who has had just really significant impact through her social media platforms. She has over 2 million followers across Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and Facebook. and has a passion, a deep passion for creating meaning and using business as a vehicle for how to do that and for how to accelerate personal development. And, you know, I thought it would be interesting for us to have a conversation. And so that's why she's joining us today. So if you will, Scott, Tom is funny, Scott, Maayan, Rachel, Kofi, and on, here we are. Yes. So without further ado, if you will give a warm, unmuted welcome to Maayan Gordon. Welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Good to have you here with us today. You can tell it's a pretty fun bunch of people that like to, you know, show up and be supportive, which is always talking about mental health. Gosh, having a supportive community is perhaps one of, if not the most important things that we can, you know, put in our lives. So to get started, I'm curious from your perspective, what's been a bright spot for you in the past week?
Yeah, I can definitely share that. But first I have to give you a shout out on your intro. Your like 1.5 minute intro is probably the best intro I've seen on like a LinkedIn Live or interview format. It felt really wonderful to hear your voice paired with the music and what you were saying. It was very like a warming, lovely experience. So I just wanted to you know, bring a spotlight to that.
That's Daniel Hall, by the way, who created that. We came together. I said, this is what I want to do. And he like brought the vision to life. So talented. And to your point, when I first saw it, I was like, oh.
Yeah, you're just like, oh my God, this is real. So for me, like the bright spot in the past week for me was really me and my husband went on a picnic together. And before we went on the picnic, we went to a incredible like beer and wine store that they have here in Birmingham, Alabama. Had the person working there grew up on a winery, so he was able to recommend a bottle of wine that we'd never tried before, which was absolutely phenomenal. And then right next to that, there's a butcher cheese shop called Son of a Butcher. And we got some like amazing cheese and some amazing meat and some delicious crackers. So everything was just incredibly on point. And then we went out to a new park that we hadn't visited before, Avondale Park here in Birmingham. And it was just lovely. And it was a no phones, just, you know, fully immersive present experience. And it was just, yeah, it was incredible.
That is I'm curious who that just heard that description is like, need to make a date for myself to do that at a park near where I live, because every bit of that sounds awesome, like life-giving. And then being outside in nature and then being connected and then connecting over food and drink. I mean, it's like, that's like a recipe, I don't know, not pun intended, but maybe, for a really amazing afternoon.
And I'll point out, I don't know like how PG or not we're supposed to keep on the show, but a great way to set up for dessert with you and your partner. Having a good connective picnic is a very effective thing to do.
It is. It fuels both emotional connectedness, which kind of is the foundation of really meaningful and powerful intimacy, is when you have, which is part of it. It's a huge part of it, emotional, regardless of anything beyond that is like, it's laying the groundwork for that, which is so important. So
it is.
That's totally permissible on this show.
One of the things I've reflected on is, I think, something about American culture that can be vastly improved is how we talk about sex and how important sexual health is to mental health and physical health. So it's something I'm trying to ease my way delicately into conversations.
There's a book you might like. There's something that a friend of mine recommended. It's called The Awakened Woman's Guide to Everlasting Love.
Oh, that's awesome.
I think you'd be super into it. Yeah. My husband and I went and did these presence practices. Her name's Lola and her husband's Thibaut. And I've known her husband for 30 years. We grew up, like our parents are friends. She's from Brazil, and just certain aspects of expression and movement and body, like there's certain things that are just inherently more normalized in the Brazilian culture that is very different than is here in the United States. But I think you'd really enjoy that book. And even just some of the presence practice stuff that they taught us was a way that we sort of got unmuted by, it's called the yoga of intimacy. I don't know if you've heard of this.
No.
But look, some things to look up after the call today.
Yeah,
but
maybe send me the link to it.
I will.
I'd like to put it on my list.
Yeah, I will, because I think you'd be very much interested in it. So very helpful. I appreciate you sharing that. It sort of paints a picture for what is meaningful to you. Relationship, connection, full presence. And, you know, we can go a number of different directions in this conversation, but one of the first things I want to talk about is to invite you to pick a story in your life of a way that you silenced yourself, muted yourself, held yourself back, either in work or outside of work. Maybe focusing on like sort of one example, and then what is a journey that you went on to unmute that part of yourself? We'd love to hear whatever story you want to share about that.
Yeah, I have plenty of stories as we all do. And I even before I share, wanna almost change the perspective a tiny bit, which is I don't know that I ever intentionally muted myself out of like sheer desire. I think anytime I unmuted myself, it was because of an environment I grew up in, a way that other people influenced how my thoughts and in my own brain was working. And so for me, the example I'll share is, let's see which one. I'll say about like, so I used to have this really horrible fear of strangers. And that really came from growing up as I'm the oldest in a family of 4. So my mom and dad had me when they were like 21 years old, which sounds terrifying to me as a 31-year-old, like having a baby that young. I was not like a full person yet. And so I think, you know, this was before cell phones were a thing. So she would send me off to school and I'd walk to school. It was like a mile. And she just, I guess, had to hope everything was okay. There was no way to stay in contact with me. And so every time before I left the house, you know, I got the talks about like, don't talk to strangers, especially older men. I think there's a lot of validated fear around, you know, women being taken advantage of, especially young women who are either, right. I was very naive growing up, you know, and also like, we're just less physically powerful as like an older man. And so grew up with that as a really, really constant messaging. And so that translated into, I would say, a natural muting that again, didn't feel really like I was doing it. It just was almost like a permanent thing of not talking to people that I didn't know. And so this really impacted me in terms of being able to even just like make friendships in school and make meaningful connections anywhere that I went, because everyone who's a friend starts out as a stranger at some point in time. And so how I kind of, you know, reversed that was first by identifying that there was this difference in how I was in the world versus how I felt inside of myself. And that even though I, you know, externally had this like fear and I would get like crazy anxiety and like, when my phone would ring, even for the first, you know, 4 or 5 years of doing business, I would mentally like try and build myself up to like answering the phone and be like, Maayan, you could do it. Like, there's nothing bad that can happen. And then I would often chicken out and make my husband like answer the phone for me. So it was pretty severe where it really impacted almost every area of my life. And I realized that that wasn't how I actually felt deep down inside. Deep down inside, I believed people were good. I believed they were trustworthy as a whole collective. And that nothing bad was going to happen to me by talking to people. But I couldn't align those two differences between like deep down inside and maybe closer to the surface inside, which translated to my external experience. So I've always had, I would say, just intuition. I think we all have intuition about how to solve the problems in our life that stem from our internal experience, because we have all that information, right? It's literally inside of us. And so I just had this intuition that if I did trade shows, I would be able to self-correct a lot of that. And I tried doing it just through social media for a while. And it really just wasn't as effective as when I started doing in-person connecting with people and getting those reps and that practice in. And even though I was doing, hundreds and hundreds of cold calls per week, I was posting and engaging with people online, I didn't have enough information in those communications for me to try and reverse this like relatively intense amount of, I like to call it brainwashing, and not in a bad way, but that's literally what it was. Conditioning, whatever kind of language you want to use. And I needed in-person interaction to be able to make any real impact on, getting to a place where I wasn't scared of people. And then from there, step further to where I actually got really excited to meet people and really, felt positive emotions around interacting with people that I didn't know. And I think, in-person experience, there's nothing that can replace it. And to me, it's just been so crucial and fundamental to every part of unmuting that I needed to do in my life, whether it was around, my fear of strangers, whether it was around the fear of sharing my story and like how I might be judged for just my own lived experience, or whether it was fear that I was, lacked information and ignorant in certain areas that I wanted to participate in conversation around, and how that might go.
Yeah, so I bet that's, relatable to people in this community. I know different people are wired differently and have had different experiences. Someone mentioned in their, childhood of something that can happen that can, to your point, this message of don't talk to strangers. And it's sort of like, at what point do you flip that switch and say, okay, now it's safe to talk to strangers? Like that's not something that naturally happens, right? Without almost permission or with a different experience that tells you that that's okay. And I'm curious, what you were sharing was interesting about having someone pick up the phone. Like when my husband and I first started dating, like he wouldn't call a restaurant to make a reservation.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, no, you just pick up the phone and you call the number and you just tell them you want a table for 2 at 6:30. Like, I don't like, what about this is stressful? Like there's not, you don't have a conversation with them. So I'm curious if you could walk us through like anything you want to share about what that was like. Almost, I don't want to diagnose anything, almost like a little like social anxiety. Would that be what it felt like? Or
yeah, so one thing I'll mention, because I've done a lot of studying in neurolinguistics, and language is something that's really fascinating to me. So when we use words like social anxiety, it might mean something different to every single one of us who hears that word. So I think it's important for us to clarify what we mean when we use certain terminology. But I would say, yes, I would get very anxious. And someone else commented here about a buildup of anxiety from childhood. And I think a lot of ways in which anxiety is used in conversation is in the context of it being a mental health issue that has like negative or preventative consequences in your life. But there's also, anxiety that we all experience, and it has different impacts on us based on a million different factors. And for me, my childhood was characterized by anxiety. Now, I didn't even have any idea that that's what I was experiencing at that time, because I'm not super old, but growing up in the 90s, still emotions were not something that we widely like discussed and talked about. There still is a lot of like negative stigma around those types of things. But for me, I just thought I experienced emotions really intensely. Like I would just describe, if I had to describe my emotional experience, I wouldn't have used any emotion words. I would have just said it's really intense. And so that's still how I perceived it, even when I was 19, 20, starting to figure out how to unravel this very seemingly complex puzzle of why I was the way that I was. And that was a way I didn't really like, and like how that could be if I was the one in control of who I was. Like, where was that misalignment between who I wanted to be and was actively trying very hard to be versus who I was. And I think there's just an amazing amount of like cognitive dissonance when you want to be a certain way and you're trying to be that certain way and not achieving it. And so for me, if I had to like break down some specific details to kind of help answer your question and confusion around like, why would someone be nervous to just call and make a reservation? So I think it's a combination of some of the things that I already mentioned, which is one, maybe I don't have enough info, where at some point, or I'm not smart enough, where at some point on this call, they're going to say something and I don't know how to respond properly in the context of social interaction and what's acceptable in social interaction. And so for me, that really came from, wealth of experience, where I was in a social situation as a kid and I said something that I thought was either really smart or made sense and had a bad reception. It was not received in the way that I intended that communication to be received. And I would have to guess every single, like that's a human experience where we've said something, we thought it was going to be taken one way and it was taken a different way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really jarring in the moment. And then it creates this anxiety moving forward of, is that going to happen again?
Yeah.
And all anxiety is based around a future consequence and outcome. And so, I think that's one of the things that could make someone feel that way. I know my husband's also the same way. And he feels it actually because sometimes he'll be on a call and I'm like listening off to the side and I'll be like, ask them about this. And he feels this pressure to, again, deviate from the normal, I would say, what he's used to a social conversation and interaction being like. And so he doesn't have the practice when I'm like, hey, could you ask how expensive this thing is? Like that, I'll be like, hey, could you call and see if they have this type of chair at the store? Like we want to go buy a chair. And he'll call and I'll be like, don't forget to ask about the price. And he gets like very flustered because he doesn't have the practice to go, could you hold on one moment? My wife is asking me something, switch attention, come back. And because he doesn't have the practice, it feels overwhelming and like this pressure, and he does not like to be in that situation. So I think there's a million different reasons why we have anxiety. Often I think it's because we're not practiced at doing something. And so we're afraid of negative results of just not having practice, right? Practice makes us feel confident. Yeah. And when we lack practice in anything, we tend to fill that void of where confidence should be or can be with anxiety.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like if you think about it from like exposure therapy, it's sort of in some degree, like the more you do the thing that you're afraid of, like I think about the interesting thing of you being like that wiring and that way of showing up in the world to being somebody who is so public with what you do and what you share, and who traveled around to almost 30 different states in the past year, obviously interacting with all different kinds of people. So it's like someone might look at that and be like, how does somebody go from being, kind of that anxious about this to being so immersed in it? I just find that fascinating that that's been your path, and even anything you want to share about what that journey was like over the past year, because I think it's fascinating. I don't know many people have done something like that before.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me too. Like as the person who's gone through it, when I sit and reflect on things, I'm also like a little bit mystified as to I would say, flexibility that our personalities truly have, and how much our environment and our experiences impacts who we are, and even who we feel deep down that we are. And we hold on to certain things, and then we can open ourselves up and experience and change and, morph into different things just from a almost sense of letting go at times. And sometimes we don't know what that is going to turn into. So for me, it really LinkedIn's been incredible. Social media has been a real vehicle for me to practice sharing my story. I think one of the benefits of social media, it's got lots of negative sides. I think it has a lot of positive traits as well. But one of the things that it does is gives you almost like an insulation if you use it that way. Now, if you're checking your phone every second, obviously you're not insulated from what's happening in digital space. But being able to share something that I felt nervous or was like really personal and that I was judging myself for more than anyone else had like actually told me negative judgmental things. I had a lot of negative judgment about me. So that was a big part of it that I was trying to work through using social media. And I could do that effectively or kind of help with that by sharing the story on my Instagram stories, something I went through, and then like putting the phone away and doing something else. Versus when you're in a conversation, you can't just like say something and then be like, I need to not talk about this. I need to not think about this. I'm done with this conversation immediately, right? There's like no social context for making that work and not having the other person be like very confused and like not know what's going on. So social media was great with that. And then the next kind of step for me, so I almost did this very like incrementally. So once I got comfortable kind of sharing my stories, not to someone's face, but through this digital space and starting to receive some positive feedback, at least around the bravery of sharing your story. Yeah. People maybe weren't necessarily saying like, that's amazing that you had that horrible experience, right? Usually it would be like, I'm sorry you went through that, or that sounds really challenging. But they would, include something around, hey, it's really brave, or it's really amazing that you shared this. And so I started to associate sharing my story and saying things that were vulnerable, personal, just true to me as a positive thing. I started to build that, mental association.
Mhm.
And so then when I started taking Zoom calls, that was like step number 2. Now I was speaking to someone's face, even if it wasn't in person.
Mhm.
And there's still a little bit of insulation, right? We feel protected in a sense by technology. That's part of why we love it so much. But it was natural for me to just start sharing those stories. I didn't even really have to think about doing it at that point, because I'd had, hundreds, if not thousands of reps sharing some personal piece of me. So it didn't feel so scary. And definitely exposure therapy, or just getting a really large amount of repetition doing something, always desensitizes us to our initial response from it. So at that point, I was desensitized to some of the emotional experience that I had on really heightened sensitivity early on before I started doing this. So Zoom calls was number 2. And then I would say number 3 was like practicing in person. So one of the things that we did on our trip last year in 2022, where we were in an RV traveling, 30 states, somewhere between like 50 and 100 cities. I'd have to count and look exactly how many, but a very large number of cities. Is we would park in a spot in town that looked kind of cool, hop out of the RV and just start walking around. And I'd, see a cool store that had, I like to collect hats now, that had like some cool hats. I'd be like, we got to go in there. And then once I was inside, just talking with the person who was there. And I think over time I developed a strategy and skill of inviting people to talk to me. So a lot of times I don't even necessarily have to start the conversation, which I do think is the hardest part. Just starting a conversation, right? Or when you go on stage and you're speaking, like the first 2-3 sentences are the most nerve-wracking and challenging. Once you're into your talk, though, it feels much like more relaxed and easy and natural. And the way that I'll share that I did that was just by being really curious about the space I was in, the things I was looking at. And over time, I've both asked people and reflected, curiosity really invites people to connect with you and to feel safe approaching you. And so like, sometimes it's a fun game for me where I'll go into a store and I'll like turn it up a notch, where I'll be like, wow, and I'll like verbalize and use lots of like facial expressions and like hand expressions. I'll be like, wow, Ben, look at this cool thing. And then it invites the store person to be like, oh yeah, that was made by local garment maker, or like whatever it is they want to add to it. Because obviously I'm not trying to hide and be like secluded. It's like this open expression of invitation for people to connect with me. And so just over time, I've learned lots of little tactics that I think, stacked together make things feel really easy and natural for me now.
Yeah. So something interesting that I heard in what you just shared is this idea that, energy gets energy, that interested people are interesting people, right? We've heard people say that before, that if you are genuinely interested in somebody else, you don't actually have to do a lot of talking. Like if you can just ask a question and then be fully present for the response, and then even just affirm the response of like, oh gosh, that's so interesting. Like, tell me more about that. Like even just the words, tell me more about that. If you have like no other card to play, that is a card that will work in most situations if someone is receptive to having a conversation, because most people are used to just being cut off or felt like, are you done yet? Like most people in a conversation are used to somebody being like, okay, are you finished? Because I need to leave mentally, emotionally, relationally. When you show up with what you said, with curiosity, genuine curiosity, a desire to understand somebody, a desire to get to know somebody, a desire to clarify something, a desire to better understand something. That if you're showing up that way out of genuine interest rather than manipulation, right? Genuine interest. It's so fascinating how receptive most people are and responsive most people are to somebody showing up that way.
Yeah, I would say I've never had someone respond negatively
Mm.
to genuine curiosity. And that's, I mean, for sure, thousands of like one-on-one interactions or sometimes group interactions.
Yeah.
Sometimes people will be a little moody because of like life that they're going through,
Life.
right? But usually they're very self-corrective, and your curiosity as a contrasting factor to what they're going through often brings a level of self-awareness. Well, they'll be like, oh, like, I'm sorry that I'm being this way. And I'm just like, oh, I don't even, one, I didn't notice, two, not a problem to me.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really just like disarming type of emotion that when we really are experiencing it ourselves, makes people feel very safe, very comfortable, and very connected.
Yeah. And it's a way that we can, help to unmute other people, because a lot of the times when people are hesitant to do that, they're having a day, they're in a mood. Sometimes they just need something that's going to shift them. And the shift could be the way that somebody shows up and interacts with them, bringing a different kind of energy than whatever they're feeling inside in that moment, or the energy that they've been experiencing so far in that day. Just like one little shift. I love Veda says, right, showing up to truly engage. That's absolutely true. Like I think of last week I was in DC with a client, and they give me a flower, like they have flower arrangements on all the tables, and they gave me this little vase of flowers. And I was like, at first I was like, thanks. And I got to like walk a half mile to whatever the metro. Then I got to get on the metro, and then I got to get on Amtrak to go home. And like, I have a bag, I was like, and there's water in it. It wasn't the most convenient thing. They were being thoughtful, but I'm like, I'm not just like getting into a car and going home. Like this is like carrying around my little plant. And there was this moment, and I think this is what, part of it is also being tuned into people, because as I was carrying this thing around for probably a mile and a half of walking, I got to the Amtrak line to go board the train, and where they like let people and they check your ticket. And the woman who was checking tickets was like, oh, what pretty flowers. And it's like when someone says something like that, we have two choices, right? The choice in that moment can be like, one, be busy on our phone. We don't even hear her say it. We ignore it. We walk by. That's like probably what happens more of the time than not. Another option is like, oh, thank you. Appreciate that. Sort of like acknowledgement, but like minimal level of engagement. And then for whatever reason, to your point about instinct and intuition, sometimes we have an intuition to do something. And I was like, do you want them? Like we have fresh flowers in our house, like pretty much all the time. And we didn't have any. Didn't have any for like a week. And I was like, oh, these would look lovely on our windowsill. And I was like, do you want them? And she was like, really? She got so excited. It was this moment of what could have just been a very brief interaction. And then she was like, you have no idea. I was just not having the best day. And like this made my day. And she's carrying around the flowers, and we're hugging. And it was, for me, this cool reminder of it doesn't have to be hard, but it does require us to be paying attention to people, which is, if you could speak to that, just about just that act of attentiveness and how that shows up and how that plays out, the impact that has.
Yeah. So first of all, because I love that. And one of the ways that so again, take it back, practice. Everything takes practice. Yeah. And I think being present takes a lot of practice. And even once you're very practiced, you have to continue practicing it, or you could slip back into the way that the world is designed to make us feel and behave, which is not present. The world right now is designed in a way to distract you away from your actual experience and the experience of others. It's a very kind of, I would say it's very collaborative and wonderful in certain ways, but it's also very divisive in lots of other ways. Mm-hmm. And one of the games, I love to create all sorts of games for myself. So one of the games that I really love to play now, but especially on the trip, I had tons and tons of opportunities to do this. I call it the compliment game. And the fun, hard part about the game is finding something that you authentically, genuinely, really believe when you're saying it, which requires a really intense amount of focus on both self and how you think and feel about something, and the other person. So anytime I was waiting in a line, or anytime I was in a conversation with someone in these stores that I was visiting in, I would, in my head, I'd go, okay, start the game, find something to compliment them on that to me feels incredibly real and genuine and authentic. And therefore I know to them will also feel that way. It's not a compliment game where you're just trying to come up with something clever or smart. It has to feel really real to you. And that game has powerful results, right? Where I would, again, this is very, I think, intuition led as a game. So it's another way to almost practice and develop intuition at the same time. Where I, talking with someone, looking at them, listening to what they're saying. And when I get that click of a feeling of, oh my God, their hairdo is so cool, saying, I really love your hair, or those earrings are so cool. The way it lights people up and makes them smile, and the responses you get and the things that you learn about who they are and all of these different things that you don't even expect to learn come out of that. So I don't think I answered your question. If you wanted to,
I don't even know what the question was, but that's a perfect reader. I mean, I forget what I'm, since this isn't a script, as if people haven't figured it out yet, these are not scripted conversations. We just kind of go where they lead us. But I think that's really, I was talking about attention, but I do think that what you shared, if everyone can think of this, drop in the chat if you've had this experience before. Say, I have. If you've maybe not realized you were doing it, but you played the compliment game, because people are so, first of all, we're hard on ourselves. We're not always, we can be very unkind to ourselves, and we can pick apart and just focus on all the ways that we're inadequate and don't measure up. And when someone speaks to something about us that is a genuine form of affirmation, essentially, it's almost like it pulls us out of that like tunnel that we're in sometimes of being down on ourselves. And like, I think of it was the same day this other thing happened. And there's a contagion. If you notice a contagion effect, that you do that one thing that connects to somebody in a genuine way that lights them up, and then you want to do more. Like, you're just naturally inspired to do more of them. Cause you're like, gosh, that felt so selfishly. That felt so good to me. Right?
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Why I made it a game is because it feels so good to do. Because you know that you're creating this meaningful impact for someone else. And no matter how you felt about yourself before that moment, you can't help but feel that you matter. And I think that's like the overarching thing that cures all emotional pain, is feeling like you matter to someone else. Because I think we have something that I fondly refer to as cosmic loneliness, which stems from our awareness that we are tiny, specks of beings in this like vast, amazing universe. And so we naturally go, how could I possibly matter when I am so small in a universe that is so big? And the only answer to that I think makes sense to anyone is we matter to other people. Maybe we don't matter to the universe. In fact, I would definitely argue we don't matter at all to the universe. So where can we matter is with our connection and our impact with other people. It's really the only space that we ever will matter as human beings. And so when you can affirm that, there's something also cosmically satisfying, like deeply existentially and practically satisfying. I'm sure, we get lots of like norepinephrine and like different endorphins that are released by our brain when we make those connections with other people. And then that sticks with those chemicals last a long time. So you'll feel great for, if I have to look back and kind of catalog my own experiences, I would say it's anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours of feeling great about yourself and humanity and all the things off of like one 30 to 60 second, 90 second compliment conversation. So it's really, I think, powerful medicine.
It is. And it goes on, social media as well. Like, well, Veda says, when we do wonderful things for others, we raise our vibration and attract great experiences. And Rachel, do you mean when someone tells you are somebody, you matter, you are enough? These are lyrics to my first song. So my first song, Somebody, came out in January. And the lyrics at the end are, it's, you are somebody, you matter, and you are enough. Like, that's the end of the song. So I very much
basically summed it up real nice.
There's a song about that somewhere. Yes, that love when people start talking to each other and having side conversations in the chat. It's great. And Russ just joined us. Welcome. Russ lives in the Pacific Northwest, where you are very familiar with that space of the world. I think that would be a challenge. That would be, let us know if you're in, that you're going to play the compliment game sometime this week. Just let us know. Just drop I'm in the comments, because it does. I feel like naturally doing that. I feel like drawn to naturally do that to people, because I don't know. I don't have much of a filter between I see something that I really like and I have to say something about it. It's like a compulsion. I don't know. Like when I was leaving the train station, so I'm feeling the high of flower exchange, get back to Baltimore, and I'm walking through the train station, and this woman has this fuchsia is like one of my favorite colors, like a magenta fuchsia. Love, love, love that color. And she had this beautiful shirt that was that color. And I walked by and I was going to keep going. And then I had a little voice inside that was like, go back and say something. And so I was like, I just want to let you know, that is the most beautiful color of your shirt. And she was like, I mean, literally like physical, like, why, thank you. And then the guy sitting next to her was like, what about my jacket? Like, he like all of a sudden got a little stark, and he had these really cool, buttons. What are they called on?
Cufflinks.
Cufflinks, thank you. Just like really cool cufflinks that were just like these multicolored things. And I was like, that is really cool. No, I said, and genuinely, I mean that. I said, I just happened to notice at first, I really love this color. And then they both were smiling when I walked away. And it's like, sometimes we, in a world that feels like there's so much that's out of our control, we can forget that we have the ability to influence the ecosystem that we're in through these seemingly little things that can make a significant difference in someone's life that don't take long to do. They take attention and intention.
Yeah, and I want to point out something that you shared also, or just add to it. So when you were on your flower high, I like that. We mean flower that you were holding, not the other kind of flower. Although that's fine too. That it's such a stark difference between how we might have felt before, like in your story, right? Feeling not super positive emotions, like kind of almost a little burdened in a sense, to feeling so full of joy that we can't help and almost feel necessary to offload some of our own joy to other people. Like it feels like it is exploding from us in this way where it feels good in a sense of relief from having such an amount of joy to share some of it with other people. And so I think, saying that it's a contagion, absolutely, because we can only really hold so much energy within ourselves for so long. And when we feel really energized, even if it's a wonderful, positive type of energy, we still need some way to offload or share some of that energy with other people. And that's why, like, we share negative energy too, right? Is like, we can't contain all of past a certain level up or downwards of energy within ourselves. And we have to share that energy with other people. So I think it's not even something that you have to do. It's something, or have to try to do. It's something you will feel absolutely compelled and won't be able to help yourself from doing when you create these real, like, intense feelings of joy. Is you will go and share them with other people in the world, which is not only a wonderful, thing from like a humanity standpoint, but is really strategic and practical for anything you want to accomplish in life. Because if you're making other people feel good, you're going to get job opportunities. You're going to get people who want to help you. Like, all of these positive things, I think, snowball and stem from that.
They do. And I love Rich. So I got to show you something really cool. Hold on, let me do a little turn so my headphones are connected here. All right. So Rich Gasson, his mom makes these Be Kind signs.
That's awesome.
She's made, Rich, how many she made? Over 11,000 since October 21. How old is she? 78? How old is your mom? You can tell us more in the chat. But in hospitals, let's see, delivering these signs in hospitals does this for my mother and all of us around her. We take the not so pleasant situation and medical appointments and turn them into positive moments. Like, what a gift to be in a spot where, like, most people that are in a hospital don't want to be there, right? They're there because something happened that probably is not working right. Or even if it's something positive or pleasant, like somebody had a baby, there's still a lot of stress around being in a hospital. So the fact that they're going around and doing something like this, like, now imagine you give this to a nurse, right, who's interacting with a bunch of patients, and that nurse has this reminder, 12,000 now. She's 81 years young. Isn't that amazing?
That is incredible. I love it.
The coolest thing. And it's such a reminder that like we can have a positive ripple effect. We don't always know the impact. Like you might have given someone a compliment in a store in like Dallas. Did you go to Texas for this?
We did, yes.
Okay. So let's just say for an example, and maybe that person then interacted with all of their coworkers, their kids, their significant other, the cashier at the grocery store differently that day because of something you did in 30 seconds.
There's a really great commercial. I don't remember. I think it was like Pepsi or Coke who came out with a commercial one time where they showed that link of like someone opened a door and then that person did something else for someone else, for someone else. I don't know. I'll have to look it up and send it to you. But like, yes, in fact, I think the ripple effect of our actions is beyond our comprehension. And if you're someone who, like me, believes in like the connectedness of the world and the universe, that makes a lot of sense when you incorporate our human experience into that philosophy of, in fact, our ripple effect is infinite if you think about it, because every interaction that happens to us impacts all other future, right? Butterfly effect type of deal. So we are constantly being butterflies for, the entire universe, and our impact on one person impacts everything and everyone in reality and in existence.
Yeah. And I think too, if we take that a step further, the connection between doing things like that and elevating our own and other people's mental health, like another side effect and consequence of showing up in the world that way with greater intention and attention, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I love you brought this up. So this is something I've been doing in person since 2016. So I had a glass blowing business. I still love to do glass blowing. I don't have a studio at home like I used to since we went on the road and moved to a totally new place in the country. But I'm able to make these little glass pendants that are really cool. I just make circle ones, and then I have all these different leather stamps from when me and my husband did leather tooling. And like one's a smiley face, one's a paw print, one is a heart. And I'll be able to, make this pendant and do a stamp in it. And it takes me like 3 to 4.5, 5 minutes to make each one. So I can bust out like 20 of them in an hour. And so I would do this on a regular basis. And then everywhere I went, I would have 2 to 3 pendants in my pocket. And I would give them strategically to certain groups of people. So anytime we were at the grocery store, I would always give one to the checkout clerk. Anytime we were at a restaurant or a bar, we'd give one to the server, but then also sometimes randomly to other people like that I would interact with. And there's something incredibly special. Why I'm bringing up this story is having something you're giving to someone else that you handmade has a incredibly more powerful impact than giving them anything else. And it's for a couple of reasons. One, it's when I gave it to them, I didn't just say, here, this is for you. I'd say, here, I made this for you. And some people have never had anyone make anything for them. Can you imagine a stranger, your entire life, no one's made, maybe you got bought some gifts, but no one's ever made anything for you. And all of a sudden, this random person comes up and says, I made this for you. And it's something beautiful and you're fascinated with it. So I think there's just something so powerful. I would encourage every single person to think of something they can make to give to people. And maybe it's like a drawing of a heart. It can be incredibly simple. It does not have to be time consuming. You don't even have to spend an hour a week, right? I was spending an hour a week doing this and able to give 20, pieces of glass art to people. You could probably do this in 15 minutes where you're just drawing hearts on a piece of paper. And I promise you, even though it sounds silly, it sounds insignificant. If you give someone a heart and said, I drew this for you.
Yeah.
Because you matter, because whatever you want to say after that, it's going to impact them in a way that you can't even imagine.
It's so true. It makes such a difference. Like, here's a great example of what you're talking about. So Natalie says, I like to carry colorful Post-it notes in my purse, leave some in my car, and write notes to leave in random places, restaurants, stores, simply to lift and encourage others. I'll never know who sees them, but I'm happy just thinking it. Hopefully it puts a smile on someone's face. Like everyone can get Post-it notes. Like put them in your car, have that available. Tom carries You Matter cards in his wallet and gives them to people. I have little You Matter and You Are Enough die cut stickers that I made. I basically did You Are Somebody, You Matter, You Are Enough, like lyrics from the song. And I have them as die cut stickers that are just, 2 inches, just little itty bitty things. And I'll give them to people. And I've seen people immediately put them on the back of their phone. Like immediately while I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't really ask or tell you to do that. But okay, I'm glad that you now need the reminder every time this is flipped over that you're reminded that you matter. And it doesn't have to be, I'm not a graphic designer. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be complicated. We overcomplicate stuff. Like if everyone just got a pack of sticky notes and left nice notes for people in more places, that alone would have a positive impact, right? It doesn't have to be grandiose. Take what you have and serve and give from that place.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This is awesome. We could talk for so much longer. I can't believe we're already like coming up at the end of the show. I'm curious if there's we've dropped your social links in the chat. So make sure you follow Maayan we can drop them again. And I love that. Nancy's here. Hi, Nancy. She says, I leave notes on random cars. Never met anyone else who did that. Look at this connection we have here. So we dropped your social info in there again. So you can find her on Instagram at Maayan Gordon Media or TikTok at Touring America. We've also got her other links in there as well. Follow her on LinkedIn. And I love the unexpected direction these conversations take because I didn't know we were going to talk about the compliment game today or leaving sticky notes on cars. But I think these are some of the most powerful ways and easy ways that we can begin to show up in the world with a bit more brightness and boldness, which is really what living an unmuted life, as I define it, is about. And so I just want to see if there's any final thoughts or insights or something that you'd want to share that's like really on your heart that you're like, I really want to say this or share this today before we sign off. Any final thoughts?
I would just say, I think the best way to create meaningful impact in your own life is to empower other people, because the byproduct of that, as we've kind of been discussing, is you feel empowered when you realize you have the power to impact other people. It's this beautiful, virtuous cycle. And that leads to everything. So when people ask me how I achieved, success in this or success in that, and those are, business things or social media numbers and following or community building, I never came at any of those things with the intention of accomplishing those things. I always came at it from a desire and commitment to bringing some type of empowering feeling to other people. And as a natural consequence of doing that, I've been able to achieve literally everything else I've ever dreamed of. Like I'm living my life in a way that when I was, and this is a little sad, so if it makes you feel sad, that's okay. But like happy ending now. When I was, growing up in school, I really never had any friends. I never got invited over to anyone's house. I was very actually excluded from lots of things and certainly felt excluded most of the time. And I used to, when I don't remember what age, but I used to cry myself to sleep and then dream about like having friends. And to go from that to a life where like I couldn't have back then imagined the amount of joy, the amount of wonderful things in my life now, because one, I just didn't know a lot of the things I'm experiencing now existed. Two, it was so far. It seemed like such a far leap from where I was that it would have been impossible for me to imagine that could possibly be true for me. And I'm only 31 now, and my life is far greater and more joyful and meaningful and all of the positive things than I ever thought were ever possible for me. That I know this is something that no matter how you're feeling, no matter what you're going through, not only is it possible for you to achieve the things you want to have, it's possible to achieve far beyond that. And it's not complicated. Is it a complicated system of how the world works? Yeah, totally. The world is very, very complex, but it's very simple in how you achieve everything that you've ever dreamed of. And it's simply by empowering other people.
Yes. Wonderful. Mic drop. Beautifully said. Tom says, you have a bigger tank to give now, Maayan. And then Veda says, I've got the power. And Natalie's definitely going to be connecting with you. So wonderful. Just want to say thank you all for coming here today, for showing up. We're going to take 2 weeks off. I'm traveling for work for the next 2 weeks. So we will be back on May 15th with someone whose work has inspired so much of my life. His name is Dr. Rick Hansen. He wrote the book Resilient, the book Hardwiring Happiness. and he's going to be on the show on the 15th. So mark your calendars. Don't want to miss it. Thank you all again for joining us. Hopefully you are all feeling uplifted. I know I am. And that we're just going to be positive ripples in the world this week. Let's do it. That's what we're gonna make happen. So with that, Maayan, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And we'll see you in a few weeks, everybody. So 3 weeks. Yeah, we'll see you in 3 weeks. All right. Bye, friends.